speak today. It's a pleasure to be here, and I think it's a really big title, isn't it? A new way of working. I mean, I'm not the oracle, I don't have a crystal ball, but hopefully what I'm going to do today is pull together some of the aspects that we've seen post-COVID, what's been rumbling on the horizon even pre-COVID, and now I've got more of an emphasis on, to pull together all the best practices that we should be thinking about when it comes to HR and looking after our people. So ultimately what I'm going to be talking about is a number of different topics, but first of all I thought it'd just be a good opportunity just to let you know a little bit about me. You already know that I'm not the oracle, but what I am is the head of people projects at Napthens, and that's an outsourced HR consultancy service. So I'm a HR generalist, a true HR consultant, and I support our businesses, our clients' businesses with their best asset, which is their people. So I'm particularly passionate about employee wellbeing and engagement, and all the pink and fluffy that HR get talked about a lot for. But I'm also a bit of a grim reaper when it comes to disciplining and dismissing employees as well. So in the team, we do the full scale of services. Now, that puts me in an ideal position to be able to talk to you today because I do understand everything our clients are going through in navigating this new way of working and the challenges that they have been experiencing. And therefore, I have been able to pull together all of the information that they have been experiencing to be able to share with you today on this recording as well. So what are we going to talk about, or what am I going to talk about today? So how to re-engage our workforce post-COVID, in the sense of that, you know, how do we keep in touch with our staff? What do we do about managing them from a hybrid point of view? How do we get them back on board? Because a lot of individuals have changed their values in the sense of COVID has made them reassess life as it once was, and as such trying to get people back on that journey of the workplace has been quite difficult, and it's continued to be so. What should we be doing to support our employees' wellbeing and employee engagement? Employee engagement and wellbeing has always been a hot topic in HR. It was really starting to grow arms and legs probably about 3, 4, 5 years ago. Never more has it been more important for you to be focusing on, in light of the fact that we can't recruit any staff. So we'll also talk about recruitment and what you should be thinking about in terms of best practice and how to attract those individuals where recruitment is so difficult at the moment. But not forgetting those existing members of staff, thinking about what we need to do to retain our current workforce. And then we'll ultimately touch on hybrid working, why we should be doing that, and perhaps the difference between hybrid working and agile working. Before I go on to it and we really get stuck in, I think it's important to recognise that there have been a number of critical shifts and challenges over the last 2 years in relation to COVID. And there's sort of 4 things that we're dealing with when it comes to driving innovation in different areas. New markets, in that we found that we've been responding to the crisis, in that we've been changing to the way that we work with global markets, operations and supply chains. And that's actually changed the way that we buy things, the way that we deal with our counterparts in other international countries, how we travel, for example. The way we can communicate, never more have we been reliant on technology than we are right now. And previously, a good old face-to-face conversation was the only route that you would ever take. I would travel hundreds of miles for a client face-to-face meeting. I don't have to do that. Thankfully, my employer now has a reduction in expenses claims from me. So everything is done on Zoom or Teams, where it can be, just for efficient working purposes. We've also seen this new way of working, and that's what we're going to be looking at today, in terms of the fact that you can work from anywhere at any time. And we've seen a number of employees who have been relocating outside of the UK, but still being able to undertake their job because they can do so from a computer and they don't have to have any face-to-face meetings. And then also some new opportunities and an attitude to work, in the sense of that attitude of flexibility. of entitlement to this flexibility that we've been seeing as well. And therefore that does present itself with some challenges whereby as a business we might have to push back and we aren't able to offer a level of flexibility that perhaps an employee thinks that we should be able to do. So there are a few different challenges and shifts, and hopefully the session today will cover all of those. First of all, let's think about how we re-engage our workforce. Now, communication is key. Whether we had COVID or not, you should be communicating effectively with your employees and across the business. But what we often forget is that we've been communicating face-to-face, and then we communicated via video, and now the expectation is we'll go back to face-to-face again. But one of the things that is really important to remember is that whatever the message is that we're trying to send out there, is that it often gets lost. And there's a communication model that's up there on the screen that talks about the universal sources of internal noise, in that when we communicate a message, what actually is received on the other end is interfered by a number of different things. Fear being the first one, fear of what they're hearing, what the impact is to the individual and to the wider business, perhaps if it's a business message. Impatience, in that they want the information faster than ever, they want you to spit it out. And then a disinterest as well. All three can happen simultaneously, or perhaps just one at a time, two at a time. But the fact is that we're dealing with a lot of challenges in getting our message across articulately and in a way that we want it to land. And that's something that we have to be aware of more than ever because of the effects of COVID and how an individual has had so much communication. If you think about the news and how we were being bombarded with lots of different information from a variety of different sources in relation to COVID, our employees are used to news overload. And therefore, if we're now coming back into the workforce and sharing vital messages with them, they're still going to perhaps have this fear. What does that mean for me? That uncertainty, the impatience and the disinterest that we see quite commonly. And therefore, there might be this resistance from employees in the sense that we're not on the same page anymore. And therefore, it's really something that you should bear consideration to is what is the message that you're actually trying to give employees about returning to work in the way that perhaps we've previously done, or a slightly different model, whether that is a hybrid type of model. What is the message? What is the timing of that message? What is the medium that you're using in terms of communicating that message? And when we face resistance, it's not simply okay anymore to say, well, this is the way we're doing it. We're not going to change that. We do have to make sure that we have a level of buy-in from that. And it's all about employee voice when it comes to HR. One of the main tools that we have in our toolkit as HR teams and professionals is that if we provide an employee voice, we're more likely to have a more engaged workforce, a more well workforce, and ultimately a more productive workforce. And that's obviously not forgetting us leading by example when it comes to how we communicate. So no tittle tackle in the back office between employees, please. But there is a new leader that's actually emerging from COVID. And generally, we see that what that is, it's a more agile leader, an individual that's more responsive to change, and this leader has had to be more responsive. It's a more empathetic leader, definitely, and we'll talk about empathy. I've got a nice video to show you shortly. So having that human approach to your staff and that you put people first. The new leader doesn't just focus on the bottom line. The new leader has HR at the table, sat with them, understanding the impact that their decisions has on the people. But also, the new leader has that ability to be inclusive and connected to hybrid teams. So they adopt that flexible approach in how they work, and they appreciate that there does need to be that flexibility when it comes to remote working or tasks and deadlines, commitments to family life as well. And that, as I said before, values have changed over the pandemic in the sense that people do like spending time with families now. They've had that taste of when they were at home and they like more of that balance. They like to have a reduced commute. So the new leader understands that. But ultimately, the new leader is resilient and future focused. So they're anticipating the change which is likely to happen in the future. And then nobody could have predicted the pandemic. I mean, maybe there was 1 or 2 people out there who would like to say that they could, but certainly that's not something that you come across every day. However, the new leader is anticipating what might happen in the business, in the economy, the external factors. So the new leader is thinking about SWOT analysis all the time and future planning and getting ahead of the competition and diversification. The new leader has definitely been born out of COVID and with this new style of management. And we see a continued focus on an individual being a leader, not a manager. They're a leader, they're not a boss. So they take ownership for what they do. And they are definitely at the forefront of that role modeling behaviour, and they command the respect in that they are approachable, they have effective communication, but more importantly, what they do is they are responsible for shaping the culture of the business, whatever that might be. And the new way of working is a perfect opportunity for you to shape the culture of your business right now. You can change how you previously worked and your previous thought processes to actually adopt a new type of culture, because everyone has experienced change and everyone is still open to the fact that change will still occur. So if you need to tweak your culture in line with what your business is doing now, then that's an appropriate time to do so. But they share that and they communicate that and use a variety of different channels to do that. So for example, we're seeing the increase of Yammer on Microsoft, this interactive chat channel. Also, Microsoft Teams having that inclusive chat and community vibe. We're seeing the use of WhatsApp still and Facebook. Gone are the days where you would communicate a company-wide email out to everyone. Everyone's so busy at the moment. What they're doing is they're just deleting emails just to get it off their to-do list. They're not reading the information that you're sharing. So think about other communication channels that you can use, because this is something that the new leader is definitely doing. When we think about supporting employee well-being, we've always had to do this. This is something that we have to do when it comes to our health and safety obligations and the health and safety work at work. We have to provide a safe working environment for our employees to work. But what we also have to do is prevent burnout as well. And we're seeing that's really common at the minute, especially in those roles that perhaps didn't have any let up during COVID, or any businesses that were frontline businesses where we've been fueled by adrenaline for a period of time, and then ultimately that adrenaline runs out, and that's what's happening with burnout. So we need to be ensuring that we're watching for signs of burnout, and that is simply changes in an individual is the first thing to spot. So we're thinking about changes in appearance, changes in outlook, changes in participation rates. I've seen changes in the sense that individuals don't cut their hair sometimes, or start to grow Bear Grylls types of beards because they just can't be bothered, and they're really struggling with their own mental health. So it could actually be that individuals suffering from burnout through mental or physical exhaustion. And some of the reasons why it could be that they're having particular difficulty with their state of well-being. So they might be facing financial pressures, an area of well-being that we don't actually think about. I attended a really great seminar a couple of weeks ago about the importance of educating our workforce on financial well-being. And that's where it starts, the education, that proactive support. We often move straight to mental health first aiders, but we don't actually consider some of the other areas of employee well-being, such as financial. And that could be simply an education piece, or some newsletters, or some e-learning in relation to budgeting, because that's not something an education provider at school level do actually offer, the future generations of our employees. What they don't prepare our children for budgeting on their first job. They don't understand, employees don't understand sometimes what a pension is, and therefore they'll often opt out and then become panicked when it's too late to do anything. So financial education can support an employee's well-being massively. Also providing them that stability when it comes to their future employment. Being transparent with the direction of the business is massively important. in securing that any concerns that an individual might have. If we're transparent with our culture, with the direction of our business, any future plans that we have, then that's something that an employee can buy into, ideally want to stay with, and feel any concerns alleviated. Family. Individuals might have lost family members during the pandemic, or have known people who have suffered and still perhaps haven't recovered and might be suffering from long COVID. This is something that we do still need to consider when it comes to managing our workforce. And also when we think about wider implications of COVID, in the sense that it might be that individuals haven't been able to access medical treatment as a result of the impacts of COVID. And as such, we need to be supporting them in this particular situation. Workload, generally a direct contributory factor to burnout. And as I mentioned about health and safety implications there, stress due to increased workload or just generally too much over a sustained period of time. Make sure we're checking in with our members of staff, see what they've got on, make sure it's transparent, make sure you've got enough people or cross skill of people if we can't, if we're struggling to recruit, to manage that workload. The environment that an individual works in. It could be that an individual is working from home and we think that they want to do that and we're happy to support them. But what sort of workstation do they have? I've known people who've been working off ironing boards for about 6 months. Also known people who just sat on the couch because they don't have space because the kids were doing their homework when obviously we were in a period of lockdown and children were being educated from home. So what is the environment that we're creating at home if we're encouraging that working from home environment? What is the environment that we're working with at back in the office, for example? Lots of businesses have moved to a hot desking situation, and that can cause some staff some unease in that they don't like to move around. They like to know what they know. They like to have their pen pot there and all their coloured highlighters there, and make sure that everything is where it is. That level of stability, and some people don't like change. So what is the environment? Do we have to do hot desking, or could it be that we can still have workstations? So how can we support? I've only put one thing on here because I think it's actually the most important thing that individuals and managers can do to actually support their employees with their wellbeing issues. To have communication. We can do that through one-to-ones, various check-ins or pulse tests, engagement surveys, a wellbeing survey, appraisals. It should be informal and it should be regular. And it should be part of your culture. You would have this proactive, open forum for individuals to share. The role of a manager is not to diagnose an individual. It's not to provide that specialist medical treatment or to problem solve an issue that an individual is going through. The manager's responsibility when it comes to proactively supporting wellbeing is to create a safe space for an individual to talk, to hear what they're saying, to listen, and to be signpost to a variety of different external or perhaps internal support services that you might offer. You might think about creating that culture of openness by encouraging newsletter discussions, or on a simple one-to-one form, putting a line about how you're feeling, what's not necessarily what's worked well for you since the last time we spoke, but what have you been up to in your life? What has worked well for you in your life rather than at work? Focus on a discussion outside of work as well as in work, because we need to build those relationships. When I said about hearing what staff have to say, it's definitely about listening. And it's not about making things better for them, and that we can't directly influence that. An employee does have to take ownership of that journey themselves. And quite often we do see, and I certainly see some of the businesses that I support, is that we might have referred an individual to occupational health for help. We might encourage them to go to the GP and perhaps see if they need to be signed off work to have some rest and recuperation. But ultimately, the employee says, no, I want to come to work. And that's something that perhaps we need to take a considered approach on. So either should they be in work, and is actually that going to support their mental health, and that they have people around them to help them, or is it actually in their best interest that they aren't able to do their job while they're currently suffering at the minute? I once had an employee that I was aware of in one of my clients' businesses that said, if I can walk, I can work. And I think that's sort of a really old-fashioned way of thinking about mental health, in the sense of it's an analogy that you can't see it, so it's not really there. You can still function physically, so you'll just crack on. And we need to make sure that we are encouraging an employee to look after their own mental health and well-being. There's a concept called toxic positivity, and that's where we try to make everything better for an employee. What we would ultimately do is, if an employee came to us with a concern, a complaint, a little gripe, and I'm not talking a grievance, something about, oh, I've had a really bad weekend, you know, the kids were playing off, I've had no sleep, then you would try to put a silver lining on that, and that phrase will come relevant when I actually show you the video in a moment. What we try to do is we try to sugarcoat it, we try to make everything nice. And we say, well, at least you had a nice weekend. One phrase that I often hear is, I'm really busy at work. Really busy, too busy, it's just ridiculous. I've never known it like this. And a manager would respond, at least you've got a job. What that does is completely undermine the individual's concern, their worry, something that they came to you with, and therefore it's really unlikely that they would ever come back to you again with that concern. In one fell swoop, we just shut them down and shut their concerns down. We trivialised what they said, and as such, that's not something that we should be doing. We should be listening to them, understanding where they're coming from, and sometimes just saying, thanks so much for sharing that, let's talk it through. I'm going to show a video now about the importance of empathy. And this is a video by Brené Brown. Some of you might have seen it. I would definitely recommend that you use this in your businesses, either for your own personal development, but also with your staff to help train them and managing upskilling in relation to the importance of communication and having empathy when an individual comes to you with a concern. So we'll just share that video now.
So what is empathy, and why is it very different than sympathy? Empathy fuels connection. Sympathy drives disconnection. Empathy, it's very interesting. Teresa Wiseman is a nursing scholar who studied professions, very diverse professions where empathy is relevant, and came up with 4 qualities of empathy. Perspective taking, the ability to take the perspective of another person or recognize their perspective as their truth. Staying out of judgment, not easy when you enjoy it as much as most of us do. Recognizing emotion in other people and then communicating that. Empathy is feeling with people. And to me, I always think of empathy as this kind of sacred space when someone's kind of in a deep hole and they shout out from the bottom and they say, I'm stuck, it's dark, I'm overwhelmed. And then we look and we say, hey, you climb down. I know what it's like down here, and you're not alone. Sympathy is, ooh, it's bad, no, you want a sandwich? Empathy is a choice, and it's a vulnerable choice, because in order to connect with you, I have to connect with something in myself that knows that feeling. Rarely, if ever, does an empathic response begin with at least. Yeah. And we do it all the time. Because you know what? Someone just shared something with us that's incredibly painful, and we're trying to silver lining it. I don't think that's a verb, but I'm using it as one. We're trying to put the silver lining around it. So, I had a miscarriage. Oh, at least you know you can get pregnant. I think my marriage is falling apart. At least you have a marriage. John's getting kicked out of school. At least Sarah is an A student. But one of the things we do sometimes in the face of very difficult conversations is we try to make things better. If I share something with you that's very difficult, I'd rather you say, I don't even know what to say right now, I'm just so glad you told me. Because the truth is, rarely can a response make something better. What makes something better is connection.
So hopefully you'll all agree that's a really powerful video, and it also gives us license to not try to make things better, because we're not equipped to do that when it comes to supporting our staff with wellbeing. And we're not medical experts. That's not something that we should do. I also noted in the video about the eye roll that happened as well. And sometimes when we can trivialize employees' concerns, especially like post-pandemic concerns, by using an eye roll. So I would say, obviously, body language as well as what we say is equally important on that one. But yeah, you've got license now. You don't have to try to fix it. You don't have to offer a response. Simply the acknowledgement and someone knowing that you've heard them is important. And that's something that has come out of the new way of working, in that we are more empathetic to individual circumstances. We've been through such a lot together in the last 2 years. We've been brought together by one common pandemic, and therefore we should be able to empathise in an individual's circumstances, not just in that, but also going forward and be able to understand an individual's different position. So I'll just move it on. So other things that we can do, aside from having good communication, is make sure that we have a nice working environment for a member of staff. Now, I'm not asking you to all go out and refurbish your offices or your sites and whatnot and spend extra money. We don't have to all have slides in our buildings, as I know some companies do. We don't also have to offer just free fruit anymore. There are things that we can do in terms of supporting our working environment. Some of the more unusual things that I'm aware of is where businesses have a customized scent for their office. And that seems a bit extreme, where they would go and design a perfume or a room fragrance just so that the office smells nice. But it's something that happens out there. But what you can do is you can think about, can an individual work by a window? What is the position of the desks? Are they back to back, in the sense that you don't actually get to see anyone's face? Could you have some kind of desk set up where it's an island of desks as opposed to everyone individually, to encourage that collaboration? Is the option of tea and coffee available rather than a vending machine? And we encourage people now, we're allowed to spend time together to share the same kettle and make each other a brew rather than individually going to a vending machine, for example. What is the equipment that we're using? So obviously this will come under the health and safety arm, in the sense that, are we providing the right equipment? Are we replacing that individual's ironing board with a desk, as a basic example? Are we thinking about the height of monitors still? Are we thinking about individuals with ergonomic issues? And having spoken to the health and safety colleagues in our team, I know that the health and safety executive will be hot on ergonomics for the next year or so, because of the impact of COVID and individuals working at home. So please make sure you're being proactive when it comes to looking at your equipment, particularly desk heights, thinking about armrests at keyboards and thinking about the seating arrangements. Can we have fun? I talk about fun a lot, certainly in my team at Napthens, head of the social committee. But what we have to do is not ram fun down people's throats. Some people just don't like having fun. Some people don't like having fun with their work colleagues, more specifically. That's not something they want to invest their time in. They want to go home. They want to either spend time alone or with friends or with their family. They don't want to do that at work. So we've coined the phrase of optional fun. If you want to have fun, then we would offer something out to a variety of different events, whether that be something more sociable at the local pub, for example, or a meal, or something a bit more active, or perhaps just an afternoon lunchtime stroll, just something that can encourage that collaborative element, but also support an employee's well-being and their engagement to the business. Engagement overall is massive, and we know that it actually improves productivity. That's not old news, or new news, should I say. The main thing, though, is intervention, and it's early intervention, so it's spotting those signs of change And that's what we can do post-pandemic, in that we acknowledge that individuals have been through a lot of change, but the new way of working is definitely about early intervention, rather than waiting for problems or an individual to come when they're at burnout or breaking point, for us to intervene very quickly, and for us to think about how we can support them, perhaps through various initiatives that we have in our business already or available outside in your local community. So we should be doing risk assessments. You should be doing that anyway in terms of stress risk assessments. And we should also be thinking about any reasonable adjustments. It could be that pre-pandemic, an individual had a condition. They might have had some kind of medical condition, or they might have now had a medical condition as a result of the pandemic or another reason. And therefore, we need to understand what that is and ensure that we're supporting that from a reasonable adjustments point of view in line with our employment law obligations that we have to do. Rather than mental health first aiders, which I know has been something that was banded around certainly before the pandemic, and lots of businesses sent their employees on courses to become accredited mental health first aiders, why not mental health champions? Just somebody who's there. And it has to be somebody who's not just HR, because we often find HR take on that counselling role, and they're trying to do other things as well. So if someone, other individuals in the business can support the HR team in those mental health champions, someone that, who's available to talk to, but also who's championing a change of culture, a more open and inclusive culture when it comes to encouraging difficult conversations and sensitive conversations in relation to wellbeing. What existing support do you have? Do you have an EAP, for example? And if you have it, are you promoting it? It's that research actually suggests that companies who have EAPs, only 5% of the workforce actually use them. 5%. It feels like a waste of money when you say that as a percentage. But one of the reasons why businesses don't actually get a lot of uptake from employees is because staff don't know about it. They know about it the first launch, and then they don't know about it after that at all. They don't know the breadth of service that it can offer. So make sure you're promoting the services that you have. Make sure you're accessing free services that might be out there as well in terms of the local community. I'm aware of one service that I promote to all of my clients that's called Able Futures. Able Futures is a government-funded mental health support tool, in that what they will do is they will provide mental health support to employees who are suffering with any condition that affects their ability to work. So providing it's affecting their mental health, it could be anything from gambling, for example, to addiction, obviously anxiety, depression, stress. What they will do is clinical professionals will actually speak to your employees or your employee who needs that particular help and put together a 9-month support program for them for free. And you can offer that benefit for complete free to your employees. You would signpost them to that, and they would self-refer. So that company is Able Futures, and something that I would advocate massively. A lot of my clients use that. And as I said, it's government funded, so that's something that we can access and should be. If anyone wants any details about that, I'm sure that I can pass those on to Eve subsequent to today's session. We should make sure that our managers are communicating regularly with the team and that they're upskilled in having sensitive conversations. I can count on certainly on my hand as a percentage how many times a manager has been appointed because they're a technical specialist in their job, not because they're a good manager. When we're thinking about succession planning, we always look internal, and that's absolutely fine, and we should always promote our colleagues internally. What we don't actually do is provide them with any line manager upskilling. We just think, you're really good at your job, you would make an awesome manager. It happens across all of industries. So what we need to do is we need to upskill our managers in having those difficult conversations more than ever now, and especially in the wake of the pandemic and the new leader and what the responsibilities are of that management role, ensuring that they feel comfortable having these conversations. That's very, very important. Thinking about recruitment, and if obviously microphones were on now, I'd probably hear a sigh of, God, we're all struggling with this. Everyone is struggling at the minute. I had my mum on the phone yesterday to say that she's concerned about going on holiday this year because Manchester Airport don't have any staff. I mean, when my mum starts to get involved, we know that there's a problem, definitely. She's worried about her holiday. But where have all the workers gone? It feels like all of a sudden the talent pool is just completely and utterly disintegrated. And a lot of individuals have suggested that perhaps that is because of Brexit. That's only actually a small problem. But what we are finding is that a lot of individuals have actually moved industry. They've moved industry to more, in their mind, more stable industries. They have moved to, for example, from hospitality, tourism and leisure. They've moved because they perhaps were made redundant, perhaps their contracts came to an end. There's a number of different reasons due to COVID, and they've gone to what they would consider more stable industries. But also perhaps taking the opportunity to reassess the values that they have and their family commitments, and could be that they've always wanted to pursue a different career. So we're actually seeing a lot of shifting of employees. The employees are still out there, but they're just in different sectors. So what you have to do is make sure that you stand out to draw people either back or new candidates back into your business. And you can do that with an employer value proposition. And what that essentially is you're pulling together all of the reward recognition programs that you offer in your business in one place, and being able to articulate that to a candidate and to an existing member of staff as well. So an employee value proposition, or an EVP, as it's also known, is a really useful tool. Also been aware of value statements as well. So very much like a pension statement, for example, or your mortgage statement at the end of the year, you get to see what you paid in, what the benefit of that is, the value of the pot, or the reduction of your mortgage as it is. We're actually seeing that businesses are pulling together a value statement whereby they can focus not just on the basic salary or hourly rate they're giving to their staff, but they can show what the holiday allowance is as well, and the value of that, and convert all this to pounds. If they do an employee recognition scheme, for example, employee of the month, the value of that, and pension contributions. And that way, when a candidate is comparing where to move, or whether they should actually, an existing employee should actually leave a business, they can actually look at the bigger picture rather than that headline figure. And we're seeing some extraordinary salaries out there. We're seeing chefs particularly just 20 grand over what they should be paying. The housing market is a good reflection of the workforce market at the minute when it comes to recruitment, and how businesses, if they're cash rich, are able to throw money at new candidates. But using the tools of your employer value proposition, a reward statement, also when we think about employer reputation as well, what are you doing on your website to promote what you do, the culture that you have, the values that you live? Do you have a careers page on there? Are you sharing about the optional fund that you're running? Are you using the tools that your customers go to regularly? And could it be that one of your customers is actually one of your next employees? We should also be thinking about widening the talent pool. And we can do that when we think about recruiting for hybrid roles, absolutely. We no longer have to have somebody on our doorstep because they want a shorter commute. We can, if we're offering hybrid, it could be that an individual is happy to work from home a number of days, and therefore that would work for us from a talent pool. We should also think about how we can re-engage leavers. There's no issue with us speaking to individuals who have left our organisation previously. It might be that some individuals have already kept in touch with them. Why can't we contact them again, see how they're getting on? We've already got that line of communication with them, and we should be engaging in that and seeing if it's something that they want to come back to. The most important thing to remember there is there will be some individuals perhaps who didn't want to come back into our organisation. So obviously, it goes without saying, perhaps don't contact those individuals, maybe even if you're desperate. There's a reason why some individuals leave, or obviously you exit some staff, and obviously be sure not to make that same mistake again, obviously getting back into employment. But we need to be thinking about talent academies Could it be that we could re-engage individuals who retired, maybe they retired earlier, and still want to work with us even on a part-time basis? What is our existing pool of resource? What is our historic pool of resource? One of the things that a business is doing to stay ahead of the competition when it comes to recruitment is undertaking something called workforce planning. And that is the strategic angle when it comes to recruitment. It's looking ahead. A gentleman called Anthony Klotz has coined the phrase the Great Resignation. That's what we're in at the minute. And workforce planning is absolutely helping to deal with that and manage that. It's the process of us using HR metrics and understanding those to forecast our staffing needs. And you can do this as part of your business plan as well. So for example, if you're looking at diversifying your business, what is the workforce need there? What is the future? No longer should we be thinking about an individual's resigned and then automatically replacing them. What is the work that they're leaving behind? Can that be segmented across other areas of the business, of employees? And could that be outsourced even? What is the strategic need for the resource that we have? We're finding that individual businesses who are using this are actually beating the competition to the market. There's not that much of a rush for them to recruit as quickly because they're forecasting and they're looking 6 months ahead. And if you've got any individuals perhaps in a training role, don't just think about what they could do right now, but think about the future and definitely start to recruit for the future needs of the business as opposed to just the immediate needs. So the recruitment process, we often forget about this in terms of we just go out with a standard job advert. We perhaps just fire out the same one. We've not changed it. The job's not changed, so why should we change the job advert? We absolutely should change it every time. Obviously, especially if we're using websites to do that. The websites will pick up algorithms where we have unique content in our job adverts and job descriptions. So we should make sure that we are making them unique every time. We're making them enticing, we're making them interesting. But we should also think about things like 3D job adverts. Either we do that via video perhaps or some kind of interaction. To really bring the job to life. It is a candidate's market out there at the moment. That's something that we can't shy away from, and therefore they have the pick of the bunch when it comes to recruitment opportunities and business opportunities. What you need to do is remember that this is a two-way process. That's a no-brainer, but more so than ever. So you're selling your business and you're selling yourself as a manager when you're hiring as well. Think about where do you need to advertise. Do you need to use an agent? If this money's tight, then do you actually need to use an agent? Obviously, agencies could be sometimes up to 20%, unless they have a pool of candidates, which I'm sure they will right now because it's the candidates market. And then really headhunting, and that's a more traditional style of agency, a recruitment agency support. Then is it really worth you paying 20%? Utilize your website. I said that earlier. Utilize the website that you have. Make sure you have a careers page on there. Make sure you're liaising with your marketing team and your IT team if you have that, to make sure that the message that you're coming across is adequate for both individual clients, individual employees, prospective employees, but also for your customers as well. And make sure those messages marry up together. So you do need a job advert. You always need a job description. You also need a person specification. This often gets forgotten about, the person specification. It's a really vital tool for actually shortlisting your candidates and doing it quickly. And time is of the essence right now when it comes to recruitment. So person specification would set out all the areas of capability, skill, aptitude, attitude, and qualification that you would want from an ideal candidate. And you would separate that into section of desirable and essential skills. It makes it easier for you to shortlist that candidate at the first stage when you're sifting their recruitment, their CV, but when you're also going through to interview stage, it also supports the discrimination-free process as well and helps you defend an employment tribunal because you can articulate why X employee got it over Y employee. Ascertain what is your selection process. If you've always done it a certain way, maybe now is time to change it. Make it exciting, make it different. Make sure that you don't make any mistakes with recruiting the right person, so it has to be accurate. So I would always suggest a first stage interview in terms of a telephone interview where I would ask them maybe basic competency-based questions, understanding what their previous role is the individual had and an element of their values. But then also a second stage interview as well, and that might be, dependent on the role, a little bit more detailed. It might think about having a face-to-face interview, but obviously if logistics is an issue, you might do that over a video. Also, it might be that you have perhaps a case study in there that somebody has to answer, or a presentation, or just some other opportunity for them to showcase to you what they would bring to the role. We all know that there's some individuals out there who are awesome at interviews. They're brilliant at interviews, and unfortunately, they're not so good in real life. What we really have to do is get to the bottom of that. And you can do that by value-based questions, understanding the culture of your organisation and the values and behaviours that you hold true to your business, and asking an employee about their values and trying to match up the two to make sure that you're aligned in that process, to avoid a long recruitment process where ultimately by the time you got to the end of it, everyone's turned off, you've actually missed the boat and somebody else has offered the individual a job. Let's make it quick and sharp. But what we can't do is forget about our existing staff, and retention of staff has never been more important. There's a new concept that I would recommend called stay interviews. We've all heard the conversation around leavers interviews, finding out why an individual has resigned and being able to use some of that feedback, perhaps deal with that problem back in the business. What we don't do is stay interviews. We don't periodically ask our staff, what do you like about this job? What do you like about working here? What are your future aspirations? We might do that in one-to-ones. We might do that in appraisals. We certainly should do that in appraisals. But that's only once a year. Are we having those informal conversations with our staff? Are we doing that via engagement surveys and pulse tests? Pulse tests being those that are more frequent, shorter engagement surveys. Are we understanding the opinions that our staff have about our managers? Are our managers doing a good job? And we need to get that from the horse's mouth by asking our staff. So stay interviews is a new concept. A lot of businesses completely shy away from this. The reason is they generally think that no news is good news. They think if they ask a member of staff, why do you stay here? They're going to say, well, I'm not really sure. I want a pay rise. And that's often where this conversation goes. You have to frame it correctly, and you have to explain the purpose of the stay interview or the stay discussion. I wouldn't necessarily even say that that's what it is. The purpose of this conversation is just to understand what you're enjoying about the business to move forward. If you have any ideas, we want to involve you, want to give you the employee voice. So it's a feedback method more than anything, rather than us opening up a can of worms, asking for an employee to complain. We're actually asking them for solutions to a problem rather than to highlight a problem. We already probably know what the problems are anyway. So hybrid working, the CIP have defined this nicely for us. I'm a fan of the definition, but what I think hybrid working actually moves away from is and doesn't incorporate is agile working. And for me, agile working is very different. Agile working for me focuses on more a goal being achieved in any which way, shape or form. It doesn't matter how we actually achieve that goal, but we achieve it in an agile way. It doesn't matter where you work, what time you work, who necessarily you work with, as long as it's the appropriate people, what desk you sit at, what route you take. But working agile definitely is more of an extension of hybrid working. And hybrid working and agile working is different to the traditional flexible working model. So when we think a flexible working requests, in that individuals would have the right to request flexible working in the event of them having dependents, for example, and the business had a legal obligation to consider that request. It's very different to the request that we're receiving now in terms of hybrid model working or agile working, in that any individual can request that they would work more flexibly. We're finding now that individuals all organisations are moving to a hybrid or agile working model. It's the new norm. And when we think about recruitment, the positions and the survey was done recently on LinkedIn actually. Survey was done recently in relation to what sort of position are you looking for when you move jobs? Does it offer a level of hybrid? Is it purely office based? Is it purely home based? And it was a resounding hybrid working model. So if you can offer flexible working, agile working in your business, it's something that you should consider. However, don't be held over a barrel. Some manufacturers, for example, can't allow machinists to work from home. So you don't have to do that. You have to just consider what's appropriate for your business. Again, if we think about retail environments, we think about hospitality, tourism and leisure, you have to be customer facing. And as such, there isn't that opportunity to do that. In some roles, perhaps even in some perhaps manager roles, think about hospitality and tourism. It could be that there's administrative duties. Do they have to be performed on site, or could they be performed at home? And that will encourage the managers of today to save for the future. What's important to recognise is that if you receive a flexible working request under the employment law legislation, we have to ascertain as to why that has been made. If that's because of dependence, or if in fact that's just because they've maybe worked flexibly over the pandemic period and therefore they feel that they should be working from home. And then therefore we can understand from a HR point of view which process to follow. But we do know that offering a hybrid way of working is going to only enhance your employer value proposition. What we are seeing though is some individuals, due to the economic situation with utility bills, is that they'd rather just come into the office if it's only around the corner to use works electricity. And that's fine for them to do that if they want to do that. So we have to have the option of doing that. Some people would prefer to spend money on petrol or diesel than actually on utilities. So I think especially at the moment with utilities and how we see pinched, obviously national, what we see with the national insurance contributions increasing. At the moment, we do have a financial pinch for staff, so amount of flexibility could assist with their financial well-being, and obviously ultimately, as we said before, education in relation to how they can budget. That is actually the end of my session, and I'm really excited that was pretty much bang on time.
I'm very impressed, Jenny. You were absolutely bang on time. So I'm going to stop recording. So if anyone does have any questions, please feel free to ask them. Just to note, everybody, our next webinar is the first week of May. I can't believe where the year is going. That's on menopause matters. So I have put the registration for that in the chat. So we'll stop the recording.